Hi and welcome. My name's Philippa Eyre, and we're going to take a look at the prevention of bullying through what I call a lens of love. What we're doing is we're going to look compassionately, setting aside our own judgments about bullies and about bullying as much as we can to try and objectively see why bullying occurs. And if we can understand the roots of bullying behavior, that provides us with an opportunity to eliminate the bullying in every context in which we come into contact with bullying. So let's get going by trying to understand what it is that causes a person to bully. And the place where I'm going to take you is to the earliest time in your life. You've been in the world outside of the womb for roughly 7 days. And your mommy, or whoever's taking care of you, isn't available because she's had to run some errand, she's taking care of a sibling, she's doing something that distracts her from your tears. Something's happened in the room, something's made you upset, you've gotten afraid, something's irritating your skin, your diaper needs to be changed, something's going on, and there you are lying powerless as a tiny little infant trying to get your mom's attention, or whoever it is who's taking care of you. And there's absolutely nothing that you can do beyond your tears to try and re-engage with that parent. Now, from the parent's perspective, that's not the worst situation in the world, because they know that they're going to take care of you if you just give them enough time. They'll finish taking care of their sibling. They'll finish doing the thing that they're doing. If it's using the washroom, if it's cooking a meal, if it's answering the door, whatever it is that prevents them from taking care of you in that moment will pass. And an adult brain has a concept of time. It knows that once this moment is over, another moment will follow, and after that another moment, and that repair happens once something gets taken care of. So if I'm feeling lonely now, if I'm feeling isolated now, that feeling of loneliness or isolation will go away once I reestablish my connection with my little child. Well, that's at least the thinking of the adult. But viewed from the perspective of a little child, especially when they're as young as a week old, we have no concept of time. We have no history of knowing that A follows B, C follows B, or that's terribly confusing. There's a sequence of events and one thing follows after the next. We simply don't get that because we have no history of that experience. And so when our mommy is unavailable to us, that's a terrifying experience for us. And the longer we're stuck in that experience, the more pain of separation we experience. So nothing traumatic has happened from the perspective of an adult. There's been no physical abuse. There's been no broken bones. There's been no violence. There's nothing terrible is happening. And yet, all of the alarm bells inside the baby's nervous system are going off because that separation from the parental figure, from that outside source of life, is terrifying. The baby doesn't know that connection will ever reoccur. And so its nervous system is building information into that system that says separation is terrifying. Now, we don't hear a lot of people talking about this experience, and part of the reason why we don't talk about it, how every single one of us experienced this when we were a tiny little child, is because there was no way that we could put it into retrievable memory, in part because we didn't have any words. At that stage, one week old, none of us could speak. We had no way of inputting that memory into a retrievable format. And you can see I've been impacted by computer studies and by having a world of computing around me. I can't retrieve those memories in any kind of way that can be decoded, that can make sense to my system. But the cells of my body remember the trauma that I experienced. And if you do something like a modality called somatic experiencing, you can actually go back to that trauma that you experienced, and you can re-feel how terrifying it was to be disconnected in those times. And in fact, what's really interesting is that when a person is rejecting of you as an adult, whenever you feel excluded or isolated and there's nothing that you can do to reconnect, your nervous system will launch you back 20 years, 30 years, as many years as it takes, back to those earliest weeks of your life. And you will relive that experience of disconnection. And that's the experience that a bully is experiencing. To compensate for the loss of connection, every child develops the ability to re-engage their parents using any strategy that they can to try and reassert control over the disconnection that they're experiencing. So they will cry louder. They will eventually learn how to move to get the attention of their parent. They'll squeal, they'll smile, they'll gurgle, they'll do everything in order to manipulate a disconnected environment to try and reestablish connection with a parent who's not connecting to them. And the feeling that we have when that parent is embracing us, when we feel connected to them, when they are nurturing us and telling us that they're always there for us, that they're going to take care of us, that our needs are their highest priority, when they hold us to the breast or do the equivalent of that, that's what we associate with the word love. That's how it feels to be loved. But on the other end of that is that disconnected experience that we experience when our parent can't meet our needs, when they're not available to heed our cries for help. And that's a feeling of disconnection, of isolation. And so we live our lives in this spectrum between the feeling of being loved and the feeling of being disconnected or isolated. This is the universe that we inhabit as human beings. And it continues throughout our lives. So when we're in that feeling of being loved, we experience the bliss, the relaxation, that ability to just be with ourselves. But the moment that there's any threat of disconnection, we're immediately thrown back to the pain that we once felt. And it was so terrifying and so painful that we will do absolutely anything to avoid going back to those sensations, to those emotions that we once felt. We'll control our environment, we'll manipulate our environment. We want, and I'm going to use another word for connection, because there's the connection to our parents, but there's also another layer of connection, and that's the connection to the greater group that we're a part of. So it could be our family, and it could be, I'm going to use the word clan for lack of a better word, but there's an extended family grouping or culture that we, and here's the new word, belong to. And our belonging is not a given. In order to belong, there's certain things that we need to avoid doing. So if we're excessively cruel, that small community that we're a part of is going to say, you're too cruel, you can't be a part of this. Or you're too aggressive. Or you're not aggressive enough. Whatever it is, and each group defines that for themselves without even knowing that they're doing it, we need to sit within that context in order to belong to that group. And what that sometimes requires is that we have to show ourselves to be more worthy of belonging than someone else in that group. Because how do you know that you're meeting the requirements of the group if you don't have some comparison to make with someone who isn't? Somewhere in there is the root of bullying, is this need for me to belong, but in order for me to belong, I have to show that I'm more worthy of acceptance and belonging than you are. So I'm going to pick on someone who's more vulnerable than me, and I'm going to put onto them those aspects that I want to avoid drawing attention to in myself. And I'm going to take you somewhere into another level to be able to look a little bit more deeply at this distinction between parts of me that are acceptable and parts of me that are unacceptable, because it'll help you understand this bullying dynamic a little bit more. So let's take a look at that in a moment.